So you've seen the Mystic Quest randomizer for the first time, you're like, man, that's awesome. How do I start doing that? Well, this video here is going to go ahead and walk you through all the options available on the randomizer site and walk you through creating your first seed. Starting off, go ahead and open up any browser and go to ffmqrando.net. That'll take you to the randomizer site. All of this is done in browser. And we're going to go ahead and navigate the site from top to bottom. You can technically do this in any order, minus the generate button. You want to save that for last. Starting off at the top here, you're going to want to go ahead and load up a ROM using the browse option here under the file section. Currently, only the North America 1.1 version is supported by the site. There is an option available to pre-customize your ROM with custom sprites or custom color work and then use that version, but it does have to be based off a 1.1 version of the ROM. Next up, we have our seed option. Save this for later, but this is how you're going to re-roll your seed. Simply clicking the roll seed option is going to go ahead and generate a new seed for you using the settings that you've chosen below. Right below the seed is your flag string. This is going to change as we go through and update our flags and some of our options here. So don't worry about this right now, we will get back to it. And then lastly, in the file section, we have the generate button, which will start the download for your seed. And before we start moving on to the options, I did want to point out up here in the sandwich button, we do have quick exploration options. So if you want to go ahead and check out the Discord or maybe the GitHub or the beta version of the site where we're testing out new features, that's how you access all of this. For right now, I'm going to go ahead and hide this though. And we're just going to start at the top and work our way down the site. So here under the options section is where you're going to go ahead and set all your seeds settings. Starting off with item shuffling here. All these little circle question mark options are tooltips that'll give you more information about each option present. I'll go ahead and go into a little bit more detail, but these are great references if you forget. So starting off here with the logic, this is going to dictate how items are placed in terms of position. So when you shuffle a seed with standard logic, items can be anywhere. It's kind of the Wild West. For friendly logic, items are placed so that way you don't really need to revisit. So things like the magic mirror will be before ice pyramid in logic. The mask will be before volcano in logic, so on and so forth. There's only two options available for this right now, which is friendly and standard. Onto the original chest option, this is going to be where all the vanilla chests are located in the game. So all the red chests that you would normally find in Mystic Quest, this is going to be the option to tell you whether or not you want to shuffle up those locations or not. When a setting is set to prioritize, that means that during this seed, anytime you would come to an original chest location, that's always going to be a key item check or a red chest. If we set this to include, items can be in the original location, but it's not always guaranteed. Down here in the NPC section, anytime a character would hand you an item, or let's say you would buy an item from one of the city vendors, that's what this is entailing. The Venus Key chests are also coded as NPC, so when you set this flag, you're technically also setting those chests, so be warned, those red chests don't work like the rest in the game. And again, we have prioritize, include, and this time we have the option to exclude them. So if you don't want NPCs to have any key items at all, you want to go ahead and just know exactly where they are just based on chests, you could set that to exclude. Battlefields are another option to change here. By default, these are going to be the original locations. So the vanilla locations, there's a reference on the wiki for that available, but anytime a battlefield would give you an item, that's what this is referring to here. And again, we have the option to prioritize, include, or exclude. Lastly, we have brown boxes. This is going to include any of those brown boxes in the vanilla game that had consumables like seeds, refreshers, cure potions, heal potions that are scattered all over the world. These are only set to include or exclude. If you include brown boxes and set original chests to include, that is going to be kind of your brown box shuffle mode, where items could technically be anywhere on a map in any location. It really kind of opens up the randomizer for those who want a little bit more of a wild card experience. Next, we have some toggle options. So shuffle brown box contents is going to tell you to shuffle the contents between the brown boxes. So for instance, the brown box in the bone dungeon before you get Quake always has seeds. If you toggle the shuffle brown box content option though, it could have anything. It could have a refresher, it could have a cure potion, it could have a heal potion, it could just have seeds again. That's what shuffle brown box contents does. You can also randomize your starting weapon. Instead of starting with Ben's steel sword, You could start with any of the other base value weapons. So you can start with a cat claw, you can start with a regular axe, you could start with bombs. You will not start with higher tier equipment. So you won't start with like the charm claw or mega grenades or Excalibur. You'll always start with the base version of a weapon. So that gives you kind of a 1 in 4 option. Up next, we have the progressive gear toggle. So what this does is anytime you would pick up a weapon or armor pickup, you'll always get the next tier up version. So the first time you open a sword chest, you're always going to get the steel sword. The second time you pick a sword chest, you're always going to get the knight sword. And then the last time you pick up a sword chest, it's going to be Excalibur. And that's how progressive gear works. Same thing with armor. Ben always starts with the steel armor, but the next time you pick up a body armor chest, you're going to get the noble armor before you get the Gaia armor. That's how that toggle works. Up next, we have enemy options. This is going to tell you how enemies are shuffled in the overworld, and we have some beta options in place to mess with how their attacks work as well. So starting off with the first option here, enemy density. This is going to be how many enemies are in a dungeon at a time. 100% is obviously going to be their vanilla setting, 75%, 50%, 25%, or none. You could just make it to where all the dungeons have no enemies, and the only enemies in every dungeon is going to be the boss. There are merits to this, of course. If you want to have a fast seed, you might want to tweak your leveling curve, but we'll get to that later. Next up, we have stat scaling. This setting is going to go ahead and dictate how strong your enemies are at a base value. So the options available here are 25% all the way up to 250% base value. What this means is based on the vanilla game, what percentage of that strength value is going to be present. Next up, we have the scaling spread. So on top of your enemy stat scaling, the scaling spread adds some variance to that value. So let's leave it on 50% here for stat scaling, and our scaling spread is 25%. What this means is that any enemy you encounter during the seed can be as weak as 25% or as strong as 75%. If I adjust the spread a little bit more, enemies can't be 0%, but they could be darn close to it and be very weak, but they can also be at 100% of what they are in vanilla. I try to make sure that the scaling can't go down to 0, so if I want to have a 50% spread here, I'll go ahead and change this to maybe like 75 or 100%, and so on and so forth for the spread. Our last option here under the enemy section is the Randomizer attacks. This is a new feature that's being employed via beta. What this does is this shuffles enemies' attacks, so, worms could use hedgehog moves, or frogs can use tree moves, and so on and so forth. You could get Dark King moves from the beginning game trees. That's how that works. There are a few options here for people who don't want to touch that. Obviously, standard will leave things as they are in vanilla. All enemies will have their default attacks. The safe option will make it to where enemy moves are shuffled, but you won't get self-destruct or Dark King attacks thrown into the mix there. So no mega whites from the beginning game trees. Chaos will shuffle everything, including self-destruct and Dark King attacks, so everything's on the table. You could have Rex self-destruct on you. You could have the zombie Minotaur cast Mega White. Everything's on the table there. And our last option here is a very meme category, self-destruct. Every enemy in the game uses the self-destruct move. As a forewarning for this category, I will let you know 2 things. First off, all enemy self-destruct damage is based off their current HP values. So, if you decide to be a true masochist and roll all the enemy stats up to about 250% of their base values, you're gonna have some chonky explosions. I'm talking like multi-thousands from bosses, things like that. The other thing to know about self-destruct is if you have a party wipe on a self-destruct seed on a battleground and you choose not to give up, the battleground counter will still consider your last battle a victory and will bring down the counter. If you die on the last encounter where you're supposed to get a weapon or the reward from the battleground, you'll basically underflow the battleground count, and it'll go up to I believe it's 225 or something like that, or 255. In which case you'll have to do 255 battles to reobtain that item, because even though it says that you got the item, if you win and then go back and check your inventory, since you chose not to give up, it resets your game state. So as a warning, safety save a lot if you're going to use the self-destruct setting. Up next, we have the map setting here. This right now only affects Doom Castle. So what this is going to do is give you the option to keep Doom Castle the way it is in vanilla, or there's 2 other options. The first option is the boss rush mode. All the dungeon puzzles are removed from Doom Castle except for the base floor, so you still have to do the shifting sands. But afterwards, it's a staircase straight up to the boss, and you'll have to go gauntlet style against the 4 refights. So that means Rex, Golem, Wyvern, Zuh. You'll have to fight them back to back to back without going through their dungeons, and it also means no trash fights on the way up to Dark King. The other option available here is Dark King only, so instead of doing the refight, it's configured the same way as Boss Rush, except there are no refights. It's a staircase straight up to the final boss. So this is something for people who just don't want to do those refights, they want to get straight to the end. Generally something saved for faster seeds. It is a good time though. Up next, we have the Tweak Frustrating Dungeons options. What this does is this allows you to change some of the more annoying dungeons and make them a little more exploration friendly. So Ice Pyramid will add some cut-ins through the walls that separate the first floor, making it to where you can navigate some of those entrances a little quicker. Giant Tree will reduce the number of mushrooms and also add some shortcuts on the first and fourth floor. And P Tower will make it to where you don't have enemies waiting for you on those one hallway staircases on the way up through the tower, regardless of your enemy density settings. After maps, we have the miscellaneous options. This is going to adjust a few other things that can't really be quantified into a single category. So things like your leveling curve. This option's pretty self-explanatory. This is going to be how quickly Ben levels up or the amount of XP needed to gain levels. So a 0.5 curve will make it to where you need to earn twice the experience to gain a level as opposed to vanilla. 1.5, 2 times. We have all the way up to 4 times. There is no 3.5 currently. But 4 times is what you want for those fast, no enemy density seeds where you can only level up from battlegrounds and boss fights. I highly recommend a 3 or 4 times gain unless you really want a challenge. After leveling curve, we have shuffle battlefield rewards. What this will do is shuffle the battlefield. So in terms of what battlefields give what rewards, it'll mix those up on the overworld. And at first you're gonna be like, whoa, I don't have those memorized. I don't want to have to do every battleground to figure out what's going on. Wildham has you covered here. If you toggle this option, everything's going to be color-coded for you. Blue battlegrounds are going to give you key items or regular items if you don't have those set to prioritize. Gray battlegrounds are always going to give you experience bonuses. And green battlegrounds are going to be your cash rewards that give you GP. The next option available is going to be your battlefield quantity. You can randomize these or you can set them to predetermined values, so you can do every battleground just like vanilla has 10, 7, 5, 3, 1 encounter, and we have options for randomized between 1 and 10 encounters or 1 and 5. A lot of the community likes 1 through 5 to have that little bit of randomness factor without going overboard and burning yourself out on 10 battles at every battleground. But the options are available there if you want them. And then next we have generate spoiler file. So this is your spoiler log toggle. If you decide to turn this on, you will get a .txt file that has all the locations of all the key items. However, it will also change your flag string up here. So if you toggle the spoiler log and you come back up here and take a look, the flag string is now different. That means if you are trying to have like a fun race or an activity with someone else and you generate a spoiler log and they don't, you will have a completely different seed to run. So just make sure that whoever you're running with knows that you're generating a spoiler log. Of course, we don't want this turned on for tournaments, but it's great to have if you're just getting used to things and you're stuck and you really need to have something to kind of rely on for your first couple runs. It is a really good tool. Next up, we have preferences. These don't impact gameplay, they're just little niceties to have. The first one's going to be randomizing Ben's palette. This setting is directly tied to the seed. So whatever your seed generates is going to predetermine Ben's palette. This is going to change his skin color, his armor color, and his hair color. So that's all the things that are randomized there. If you do load in a customized ROM with a different sprite model, I don't know if that'll work with that. Also, if you've loaded in a ROM with a customized sprite palette, I believe that'll shuffle no problem. The next option here is a quality of life feature that's been added, which is to remember your ROM. So if you use the same ROM to generate your seeds, you can go ahead and toggle this, save your preferences, and every time you load up the FFMQRando.net site, it should remember the ROM that you've loaded in last time. That being said, things are subject to change if an update is pushed out, so just check on that really quick before you assume that you're going to be loading in the right ROM. The last customization option down here is not really a customization option, but it's something for our more tech savvy, or not even tech savvy, but programmer creative folks in the community. It's the YAML presets. So if you're familiar with YAML, and you want to expand some of the modifications of the seed beyond the values that are offered here on the website, you can manually load in flags with different weights via text editor, and you can run seeds that way. That being said, I'm not familiar with YAML, so I won't speak on this at length, but if you do have any questions, we do have people familiar in the community Discord. Again, that's always a great resource to have. Community is always open for discussion. The last section down here is going to be your general information about the randomizer. So again, the ROM version needs to be a North America version 1.1 ROM for this to correctly work. And there are some changes from the vanilla game that are logged here on the site. The last thing I want to go over here is if you need a refresher on any of this or just have any more questions or things that you want to learn from, if you come up here and go to the Discord, we do have a new player room that kind of goes over all this information, tells you what the latest version is. There's some resources here donated by the other members of the community, like how to get the emo tracker working, what versions to look for. There's an item spreadsheet available in here. Other members of the community have put in guides on how to update your character's palette if you want to make a custom palette. And then also Battlefield resource here. So this is a link to the wiki page that tells you what all the rewards of the battlefields are in vanilla. I hope this helped you guys out. I've been having a great time playing this randomizer, but I know some things can be a little daunting for people, and I wanted to make this video just to kind of cover people who might not be necessarily comfortable just reading and figuring out on their own, and wanted kind of a stylized guide for them to use. Again, as always, huge shout outs to Wild Ham for making this randomizer. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I will check those and answer those best of my ability, or hit me up in the Discord or any of the other senior members. We'll be more than happy to answer those questions for you. But thanks for watching, guys. Y'all take care.